Hi, this is SQL. Welcome to my studio in Amsterdam. Today I will show you how I made my remix from Sohn's Lights. I will be discussing a bootleg I did of Sohn Lights. The reason I made this bootleg is because my girlfriend showed me this track and she said, well, this could be really well if you make a remix of this. So then I just started playing around with it, and actually it turned into a really cool kind of remix, which then got picked up by Anjuna Deep, and they really wanted to release it. So then it turned into an official remix, and it will be released end of this month, or October 29th. And yeah, I'll just show you how I made it from start to finish. I started out by just taking the whole track and just cutting some pieces out of it. As you can see, I just took the whole track and I just looped a bit of it. I think I started out with this bell sound actually. This is the intro of the track. It works well because there's no kick or anything in it before. And the whole track is pretty much, it's not a real dance track. It has a 4x4 beat, but it's easy to layer it with some other stuff. I just warped this quite easily, and I think I kept the original tempo because I didn't want to change the pitch, and I didn't want to use any complex algorithms because they usually don't really change the sound for the better. So what I usually do is just right click and warp from here straight, and then usually it finds the BPM that I'm looking for automatically. Then I always put it on repitch because it's the most natural sounding algorithm, and that's also the reason why I didn't change the BPM. Like the master tempo, it's 120, and the original track is also in 120. And this makes it really easy to just cut pieces without having to worry about the sync and all that sort of things. So I started with this bell. This is like the basis of the track. And I just started building around it, and I think starting with the kick. I just wanted to have a more heavier kick because the original it's quite, yeah, it's not so banging. I can show you the original. So I wanted the kick to be a bit more upfront. So I added this kick drum, which is basically consists of 2 kick drums. I'm using this little plugin called Bassism. I've been using it for maybe 10 years already. And it's a really low end kind of plugin, which basically just takes a sine wave and applies some pitch modulation and an envelope to create your own kick drum. And it's really nice to use this for low end of the kick because it's just a sine wave, it's really clean, and you can tweak anything you want. You can tune the tail to a specific note, and you have a lot of control over the sound. So this is the low end of the kick. As you can see, when I change any parameters, the waveform changes as well. Then on top, I'm using a 909 kick from the drum Sohn. It's just a little bit of attack, and I cut out the low end, and just together they just form a nice solid kick. I like the drum Sohn because you can tweak it a lot. You can also tune the bass drum. You can specify how much attack you want and decay and all sorts of things. Yeah, for processing, I'm using some EQing, but it's nothing extreme. So on the sub end, the low end, I've got an SSL channel strip, but I'm basically only using the EQ section. Cutting out a little bit of the low end. As you can see, cutting out also some high frequencies, and I'm boosting around 60 Hertz, just because I like the sub frequencies that is in this region. I've got another EQ, and the reason I'm using two EQs is that this is a EQ that really colors the sound, because it's analog modeled, and the FabFilter Pro Q, it's more sterile, so I can use it to really pinpoint some problem frequencies and cut them out. There was some oomph in there that I didn't want, so I made a little dip. And for the rest, I just cut out all of the high frequencies because I'm going to use this other layer for the high frequencies. Yeah, on the drum Sohn, I'm also using some saturation. And this is really my go-to saturation plugin when I'm tweaking kick drums. It has a lot of crazy saturation and unwanted effects that you usually have with tape, but for some reason on kick drums it sounds really nice. This is the original straight from the drum Sohn, and this is with the magnetic on. It really changes the sound a lot. This EQ is just cutting out the low frequencies. Then to glue everything together, I'm sending them all to the same group. And on the group, I'm again using the magnetic to kind of compress it. The magnetic also adds a really nice kind of low end boost to the sound. This is without, and this is with. You can see it's a bit more compact, a bit more full. Then again, some EQing, just cutting out some extreme frequencies, and maybe just a little bit of bass, and also some subtle settings on the SSL, but nothing too special. This is my usual process to make kick drums. What I then did is record the bass line. And most of my bass lines are recorded on the SH9. It's a pretty old machine from, I think, 78 or something, or 87 actually, I mean. And it's just perfect for bass lines. Using this on, I think 80% of my tracks use this machine as bass lines. And I think I just played it by hand. It was not really properly played, so I end up tweaking it a lot by just using the warping function in Ableton. And the bass line with the bells together, they create a nice, how do you say, they play well together. think I recorded the bass line with the cutoff fully open, and then I used a filter, the Moog filter from UAD, to create a progression in the track. I like this better because when you record the whole cutoff automation straight from the synth, it's harder to tweak it afterwards. So this is what I recorded. And then I'm using the Moog filter to actually drive it, put some drive on it, and just as the main filter. It's just a really nice filter. It's really fat and warm. I'm also creating a bit of stereo delay on the bass line, just because I like these really wide bass lines. And for this I'm using the Sound Toys effect rack. I really like it because you can stack different Sound Toys effects on top of each other, and they're my favorite effects. Sound Toys bundle is something I use on every production I make. I just started out with this radiator, and it's basically a preamp, and it just makes the sound a bit more gritty. And then I'm using the Echo Boy. Actually, I think this is not even being used. It's just a slight delay. Nothing special. But the stereo width comes from the microshift. Microshift is a really old school chorus. I think it's also modeled from an old chorus unit. And it's just perfect for creating this stereo bass lines, and it also works well on pads and stuff. You can see if you mix it in wet, it's really wide. I'm sending the bass channel also to a bus. I think it doesn't really make any sense if I think about it now, but I don't know, probably I had different channels in here before which I took out, but I'm using some more processing on this bus. I'm adding even more saturation and more, I'm using the Ableton erosion just to get some more noise on it. I just really like this gritty, noisy kind of bass lines. This really adds some noise. Just to make it even more gritty. And there's a bunch of stuff here on bypass. I was just probably trying out some different kind of effects. I've got the UAD Studer on here. It's like a tape saturation emulation, and the nice thing about this saturator is that it adds a lot of low end, and you've got these EQs with low frequencies, which allow you to add really a lot of body to the bass. If I take this out. It's more like I'm using it like an EQ, but again, I just love saturation, and sometimes stack 3, 4, 5 different saturation plugins on top of each other. Next in the chain is an equalizer, and I'm doing some mid-side EQing. What it is that I'm splitting the mid signal from the side signal, and the mid signal is basically the mono signal of the sound, and the side is the stereo information. So I can EQ the mono information separately from the stereo information. And especially on the bass line, this is really handy because I'm using the stereo wideners. I want to make sure that everything below 100 Hertz is in mono, because when I'm playing in a club or some sound systems, they will have problems with bass in stereo. It just creates a lot of phasing issues and stuff you don't want. So I'm just using a low cut on the sides till 100 Hertz, and I have another low cut on the mid, just to cut off a little bit of the sub frequencies, just to tame it a little bit, because I was adding a lot of saturation and a lot of low end, and I just want to tame it a little bit. Yeah, next in the chain is the multi-band compressor. I don't know why I'm adding so much bass, but apparently it was needed. So I'm using again a multi-band compressor to expand some of the low end. And last in the chain is my compressor that's doing the side chaining. So it's a lot of processing on the bass line. And the basis for the track was, of course, the melody and the track itself and the bass line together. This just creates the whole vibe. You can hear it, it just plays really well together. We weave in and out of consciousness alone, till our bodies collide and keep us from getting cold. Because it's a bootleg, I had already a theme when I started, so for me it's just a matter of adding some more elements to it and kind of changing the whole arrangement. And as you can see on this track, I just got all different pieces of the original song, because there was a bit in there that I really wanted to cut out of the track, because the vocal became a bit too cheesy, and I think this was the problem with the original track, that at a certain point it just became too intense. So I just cut out little bits and pieces of the track, and I just kind of rebuilt the whole track from this. And then I just started adding elements to it to just kind of paint the picture. The original track, the only processing I'm doing is just cutting off the low end, just because I'm adding my own kick and bass. But I didn't want to do too much processing because it's a mastered track, and I wish I would have the parts so I could have all the tracks separately, but they couldn't provide me with the parts, so I had to do it like this. So I choose just to cut the low end because there's already a lot of processing on it. I think then I just started adding some percussion first to just create a nice groove. So I was working with this, and then I just started adding things like a clap. I use this rim shot. This has quite some processing on it, just to make it a bit interesting. Sending it to 2 bus channels. These 2 buses, or send channels, whatever you want to call them, they have 2 identical delays on them. It's the UAD Roland Space Echo, and I'm just using 2 different settings. And then I'm panning them left and right, And this just creates this really deep kind of stereo delay effect. So without it, it's really dry. For the rest, something I do with a lot of percussion is adding some mid to it by using a multi-band compressor and then expanding the mid range. I'm doing this lately more than EQing because I like the dynamics. Yeah, I just like the way it adds mid frequencies to the sound when the sound is hitting. The cool thing is you can tell this compressor that it has to add mid when the high end is hitting, and it's basically it's a multi-band compressor with sidechain, but the sidechain is now being used internally. So I've got my mid band set up here, and I set it to expand. And when you go to the expert settings, you can either have it on band, which means that whenever this band is playing, it's gonna expand this region, or you can put it on free. And when you put it on free mode, it's listening to this bit of the sound. So whenever the high frequencies are hitting, it's adding mid. So it gives the clap a bit more body. Instead of just using an EQ, it's really listening to what's happening in the sound and adding mid frequencies dynamically to it. Without it, it's quite thin. And with it, it just creates a bit more body. For the rest, I just have a small reverb on here, just a room reverb, nothing special. And I'm cutting out some low end. I don't use a lot of loops usually, but for this track, I just found a loop that fit perfectly. It's this loop, and it just makes the groove run a little bit more, like it creates a bit more of a fast motion. I did do some processing on the loop, and what I like to do is use the warp mode beats and then using it as a transient shaper. It's a little trick I learned, that when you put it on transients and you select this icon here, you can cut the release. I use this to make the loop a bit more tight. For the rest, there's this effect rack with a really small reverb. And the same trick I'm using on the clap, just adding some mid-range by using a multi-band compressor. For the rest, I add some more melody layers to it to just make it a bit more interesting. And one of the main themes that I add was this violin. And the way I got this melody is by actually converting the original track to MIDI and just taking out some notes that I wanted. So I just took a piece of this original track. Let me see which part it was. I think it was this part. this has the strings in it, and I just selected a bit and converted the harmony to a new MIDI track. I like to do this because I'm not classically trained and I can't really play this on the piano or anything, so I'm using this function a lot just to get a basic feel for the notes which I can use, and it actually works quite well. So I think from this I just stripped the notes that I wanted. Probably took out all this. And from this I started building a chord. And the chord turned out to be this. Like you can see here, some of the original notes are still here. In the end I made this progression out of it. The violin is from the Contact library. And this is just the library that I got when I purchased Contacts, or like Complete Line. Comes with a bunch of libraries. One of them is this string ensemble. I think it's from the factory library even. Yeah, it's this string ensemble. The string gets all of its character from the processing, because when I turn off all the processing, it sounds like this. I just take out also this. This is just the violin, but I'm adding the guitar rig, and the guitar rig is just really nice multi-effect unit, and I really like multi-effects units because I just like stacking things on top of each other and let them control each other, or let LFOs modulate it. So that's why I also really like the guitar rig. First I added a delay. And then I added a phaser, or flanger actually. And I'm using the LFO to control, I think it's the rate that's being controlled. That's actually the tape echo speed from the tape echo. You can see it also modulating. It just makes it really moving. And as a last plugin, I'm using the Psyche delay. What this one does is it's just basically a delay with a pitch control. So it's adding the delays. They are on an octave higher than the original sound. Then I'm sending it to some reverb. I think this is a really long hall. And then just some saturation and some basic EQing, nothing special. But this really creates a nice feel for this track. Plays really well together with the original because I just took the notes and made the progression fit. For the rest, I made some effects, melody effects, and I used again the notes that I extracted from the original track. And I'm using the contacts again. It sounds really random, but with some effects on top of it, it sounds really interesting. Yeah, so the sound I'm playing, it's a clarinet, also from the Contact library. It's from the same factory library as the other violin. On itself, it sounds a bit strange. But when I add the guitar rig, it's really nice atmospheric sound. I think this is just a preset that I use from Guitar Rig. I do this a lot just to try to look for something that I couldn't think of. And the effects presets from the Guitar Rig are just amazing. And they just do all sorts of crazy stuff that you really couldn't imagine yourself. So what exactly is going on in this preset, I could probably find out, but I didn't really mind. I just looked for it and it just fits perfectly. Then I just cut some low end of it and I made it a bit wider. I'm using this Dr. MS spatial processor, and again it's a mid-side processor, so I'm splitting the mono and the stereo signals, and I just increased the width on the sides. It just makes it really wide. On this plugin you can really hear the difference also between the sides and the mid, because you can solo them. But the mids is just the mono, and this is the side information. You gotta watch out with this plugin though, because when you push it too far, it can create some phasing problems. But I'm using this kind of effect melody to just get out of this this part here. Kind of like a bridge between this part and this part. In the break, I cut obviously a piece of the break of the original track. And I just let it run with the bass line. I also doubled up a little bit of this vocal, and I pitched it up 7 semitones. So, but if you mix it in really low, it's kind of cool. All the way, all the way, if you dare to believe it, floods and washes all the way. Blood, sweat, and tears won't retrieve it. You just have to wait to receive the light. You dare to believe it. Now I'm just building with the same elements that I already showed you before. I think I didn't make that much more melodies and more elements, but I just really looked at the arrangement and tried to make it as interesting as possible with as little elements as possible. So basically just have the violin, some percussion, and the kick and bass line and the percussion that's doing the whole track. In the break I'm opening up the bass line with the filter. And I'm really building up towards this climax that starts here. When the climax comes in, I just add a bunch of percussion, like a ride and stuff like that. To receive it, to receive it. I've got these heads, like these running fast heads. Just to create more like a running kind of groove. There's some delays on here. And some saturation. Again, kind of my go-to saturation tool, this one. And I'm using also the Moog filter to add some drive. I'm not using the filter really, but just adding drive. For the rest, there's this clap that comes in here. It's just a straight 909 clap, nothing special. Then this part is basically just going further on the same theme, but I'm trying to not let the same part play for too long. So I've got about 16 or 32 bars of this until I change back to a more groovy part again. I think that's it for all the elements. Hi, thanks for watching. The remix is out now. You can get it on Beatport.